if you'd like a visual aid for what the flip maneuver and deployment sequence looks like. This is how SpaceX illustrates it. We'll go ahead and leave that up for you for just a moment so you get an idea of what we're in store for this afternoon. Taking a look at the live chat here before we continue to roll on, want to give a shout to Stephanie B., one of our wonderful moderators, helping to keep things kosher in the live chat. Good to see you, Stephanie. Thanks for being with us this afternoon. I want to thank one of our channel members, Jimbo Indy, for gifting a Spaceflight Now membership. Really appreciate that, Jimbo. Thanks for sharing some SFN generosity. And I'm Lita with a $2 super chat, another one of our wonderful channel members, who says very kindly, I hope you know how much we appreciate you. Well, thank you so much, Lita. Your appreciation is very much shared with all of the team here. We're now T-minus 16 minutes, 32 seconds and counting. Now less than 30 seconds away from the start of LOX load on the second stage. And about 6 minutes away from the point where we should be getting our eyes on the Falcon 9 there in Vandenberg. While we are keeping our eyes on, or we should soon be keeping our eyes on the Falcon 9 on the west coast at Vandenberg Space Force Base, we are also very much watching what's happening down in Starbase in southern Texas, courtesy of our friends with Lab Padre, taking a look at the Super Heavy booster supporting Ship 28 up top. SpaceX did complete a fueling test, if you were with us for our Crew 8 launch coverage. Brought you some live pictures of, it's called a wet dress rehearsal in progress down at the orbital launch mount. An important fueling test of the Starship rocket ahead of its planned fully integrated test flight coming up in the presumably near future, although TBD on exactly the timing of that. The SpaceX still needs to get a launch license from the Federal Aviation Administration, or the FAA. SpaceX also needs to show that it has completed the 17 action items that were laid out as part of the mishap investigation following an incomplete second test flight of Starship. Early this morning, or I say early this morning, it was right about noon, SpaceX commented that it loaded more than 10 million pounds of propellant into Starship in the overnight hours and proceeded with a countdown demonstration that brought it down to T-minus 10 seconds. So certainly in a good and important step of testing the Starship vehicle prior to getting clearance for its next test flight. We're now T-minus 13 minutes, 14 seconds and counting. I mentioned there are 53 payloads on board the Transporter-10 mission. It's going to be a fairly long deployment sequence, so a bit of housekeeping at this point will let you know that we'll continue to stay through with this mission until the point which we need to pause, stop down, and pivot over to our live coverage of the Starlink 6-41 mission here at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. At that point, assuming that the deployment sequence is still underway, which timeline being what it is, it should be, we will continue to monitor and keep you posted on the deployment sequence simultaneously as we're covering the Starlink mission. So we'll port over folks from one live stream to another, and we'll just keep rolling like it's another crew launch night. We're going for 4 hours straight. So on board the Transporter-10 mission, the very last payload that's set to deploy at T+2 hours, 33 minutes, and 1 second is this fellow right here. It's called MethaneSat. If you'd like to read more about it, we do have an article about this mission up on our website, spaceflightnow.com. But in brief, this this satellite was developed by a subsidiary of the nonprofit Environmental Defense Fund. And as you might infer from the name, this MethaneSat is designed to monitor both the source and the quantity of methane, an important contributor to climate change. And it will track that process around the world. It's designed to circle the globe every 95 minutes once it's on orbit. This particular image was captured by BAE Systems, and this was part of the process as engineers from Ball Aerospace were examining this hardware after thermal vacuum testing, or TVAC testing. Part of the process of making sure that the satellite is prepared to survive in the vacuum of space during its lifetime. MethaneSat was funded through a combination of funding sources, primarily financial partnership between EDF and the government of New Zealand. Some of the largest donors to the EDF to support this particular work are the Bezos Earth Fund, Arnold Ventures, and the Robertson Foundation, as well as the TED Audacious Project. Coming into T-minus 10 minutes, we should be seeing the Falcon 9 rocket fairly soon. Before that happens, though, this is a graphical overview of some of the primary target areas that they anticipate MethaneSat observing to gather data and information about some of the sources of methane around the globe. Also on board, a spacecraft that some folks here on Florida's Space Coast have been eagerly watching and waiting to see when it will launch. This is a satellite from a company in Cape Canaveral called Sidus Space. This is the LizzieSat-1, which in addition to carrying a few tech demos also has a piece of NASA tech on board, courtesy of NASA's Stennis Space Center down in the Mississippi area. Carries what the center describes as its first ever in-flight autonomous systems software mission. These are just two of the spacecraft that are on board Transporter-10 Rideshare this afternoon. And in a moment, we'll be able to bring you views of the Falcon 9 rocket and see if things are as foggy in Vandenberg as they are out here. Hopefully the answer to that is no. So we're now T-minus 8 minutes, 10 seconds and counting. About a minute away from the engine chill down sequence beginning for the Falcon 9 rocket. You may have noticed a slight jump in time as the SpaceX feed coming in on a slight delay from the launch in real time. So we'll go ahead and stick with the SpaceX timeline here at the bottom of your screen. T minus 6 minutes, 36 seconds and counting. You may have noticed on the Falcon 9 second stage, which hopefully we'll get a view back on that in just a moment here. We did see, yeah, on the second stage, that gray band around the Falcon 9 second stage. That indicates, as I mentioned, there's going to be deployments through past the 2.5-hour mark after liftoff. So that band helps protect the propellant on the second stage and maintain its proper temperature. As you're seeing the descriptions of the parts of the vehicle here. Of course, the Falcon 9 stands at 70 meters or 229 feet tall with a diameter of 3.66 meters or 12 feet. Bottom first 2/3. The first stage. This one has flown 4 times before. Tail number 1081, going for its 5th flight today. Now you can see a little bit more about the MVAC engine here. And SpaceX preparing for strong back retract, coming up in about 20-ish seconds or so. That'll begin again with the clamp arms underneath the payload fairings opening up, and the transporter erector or the strong back will recline about 13 degrees away from the vehicle. The payload fairings at the top of the rocket contain the 53 payloads that are flying today, made up of a carbon composite material, 13.1 meters or 43 feet tall, 5.2 meters or 17.1 feet in diameter. This is landing zone 4. This is where the first stage booster will be landing this afternoon. SpaceX does have a recovery vessel similar to the ones Bob and Doug out here on Florida's Space Coast that will be used to recover the payload fairings. You're seeing the strong back retract sequence begin now. That umbilical becoming a little bit more taut as the TE begins to lean back. We're coming into the final 3 minutes of the count. SpaceX is approaching the conclusion of LOX load on board the first stage. Taking a look at the live chat, I want to thank a few folks for their support as we come into the final minutes of the count. Oscar the Rosalina fan has been a member for 1 month. Thank you so much for being with us. Really appreciate that. John Mon, $2 super chat. Thank you so much for your support, John. And Jivenjis Nozenko. Apologies if I just completely botched your name, but thank you so much for the €1 super chat. Really appreciate that. As we are now about 2.5 minutes to liftoff, really appreciate the more than 12,000 of you who are joining us live this afternoon. If you could, be sure to give this video a like and share the stream so that more folks can find this live coverage as we are preparing to see the launch of this Falcon 9 very soon. And we're seeing the call and the visual on ground gas closeouts as we are very close to seeing the launch of the Transporter-10 mission here. We're going to go ahead and listen in to the final minute of the count as you're getting ready to see the Transporter-10 mission launch from Vandenberg Space Force Base. Let's listen in.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
Great news there, folks. Falcon 9 has just entered the startup state. We're just waiting on our final go from our launch director, or LD.
LD is go for launch.
And there's that go for launch from our launch director. So with that, all systems are go for Falcon 9's launch of the Transporter-10 mission.
T-minus 30 seconds. T-minus 15 seconds. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition. And liftoff, Falcon 9. Go SpaceX, go Transporter-10.
Vehicle is pitching downrange.
Downloading MOD chamber pressures.
T plus 30 seconds into flight, Falcon 9 has cleared the tower at Space Launch Complex 4 East. We're just coming back up on the point of throttling down to prepare for max Q, which is the point of maximum aerodynamic stresses on the vehicle. You can see
Power and telemetry nominal.
You can see some great views of the California coast down there below.
Falcon 9 is supersonic. Max Q.
And there we go. We just passed through the point of max Q, which means we have throttled the M1D engines back up. And coming up next, we do have 5 events, starting with MECO, or main engine cutoff, stage separation, stage 1 flip, second engine start 1, and then the beginning of boost back burn. Today's mission is what we refer to as a return to launch site mission. And that means that the first stage will flip around and point back towards the launch site where it took off from, and it will perform a boost back burn. Should be coming up on main engine cutoff in around 30 seconds. Getting a great tracking shot of the vehicle from the ground here.
Miko? Stage separation confirmed. And back ignition. Stage 1 boost back startup.
Wow, beautiful views here. You just heard and saw those 5 events that happened back to back, including main engine cutoff, stage separation, stage 1 flip, second engine start 1, and the beginning of boost back burn. On the left side of your screen there, you see the first stage performing its boost back burn, heading towards the launch site. And on the right is the MVAC engine continuing to accelerate our payloads into orbit.
Fairing separation confirmed.
And there go those 2 fairing halves. You can now see all of our payloads exposed to the vacuum of space. We should be wrapping up the boost back burn on the first stage in just around 10 seconds.
Stage 1 boost back shutdown.
There we go. We just had confirmation of the end of boost back burn. The next major milestone coming up is the entry burn on our first stage, and that's scheduled to occur around the T+6 minute mark. Now on the right side of your screen, we're currently in the first of 4 MVAC burns, and this burn should last for another 4 minutes or so. And as I mentioned, the next milestone will be the first stage's entry burn, coming up in just a couple minutes. For those of you who are unfamiliar, Falcon 9 performs 2 burns in order to land. The first burn of the 2 is the entry burn, and that slows the vehicle down before hitting the denser parts of the Earth's atmosphere. And without this burn, we'd only be using the atmospheric drag to slow the vehicle down, which would add a significant amount of stress on the rocket. So for today's mission, a single Merlin 1D engine will relight for this entry burn. And following that entry burn, the booster will go through the final burn, which is the landing burn, and that'll slow the vehicle down just enough to make a soft landing on our landing pad. You can see there on the left side of your screen a view of the booster. Falcon 9 is equipped with 4 hypersonic grid fins, and those are positioned near the top of the first stage. And these help steer the vehicle as it returns to Earth. Wow, on the left side of your screen, you can see a great ground tracking shot of the first stage. Those white puffs coming off Falcon 9 are...
Vehicles are on a nominal trajectory.
Those are cold nitrogen gas, which help with our attitude control. And this is just making small adjustments to the vehicle as it heads back towards the landing zone. On the right side of your screen, MVAC is continuing to burn towards orbit, currently traveling over 11,000 kilometers per hour. Again, coming up on that entry burn on the first stage in around 30 seconds. The entry burn will slow the vehicle down, so pay attention to that telemetry in the bottom left side of your screen.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
And there's that startup of the entry burn. This burn should last just around 20 seconds. We can see the vehicle rapidly decelerating now.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
And there we go. That concludes our entry burn. The first stage has 1 more burn left prior to landing. And again, as I mentioned earlier, we will be attempting to recover this booster for the 5th time
Stage 1
today.
FTS has saved.
The Falcon 9 first stage is equipped with 4 landing legs made of carbon fiber and aluminum honeycomb.
Vehicles are on a nominal trajectory.
We should see those
Stage
legs
1 is
deploy just
transonic.
prior to landing. On the left, you can see a tracking shot of the first stage, and on the right, you can see the onboard cameras looking down towards the ground. Should be starting up that landing
Stage
burn
1
any
landing
second.
burn. Landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
Wow, what a view of that landing, folks. As you just saw and probably heard, we did just successfully land the first stage back at landing zone 4. So that marks the fifth
internal guidance.
That marks the 5th landing for this specific booster. It also marks SpaceX's 280th landing of an orbital class rocket. Next milestone coming up in just around 15 seconds should be the shutdown of our second stage engine, the MVAC.
And you've just been seeing and watching or hearing a successful launch and landing of that first stage booster as the Merlin vacuum engine now beginning to conclude its burn at this stage. And this will set up the process of payload deployment as the Falcon 9 second stage has gone into a nominal parking orbit. It'll remain in this coast phase until T plus 50 minutes, 12 seconds. That'll be a second burn lasting just 4 seconds. And then that'll set up the satellite deployment, which will begin with a satellite called Hammer, which is being deployed by a company called SSO Launch, which has taken charge of 28 of the 53 payloads on board this mission. Because this is a transporter rideshare, SpaceX is going to be continuing on with its broadcasts through satellite deployment. As you can see, we're just a little under 11 minutes into flight. Again, the SpaceX Falcon 9 second stage is in a parking orbit and will burn, and then payload deployment begins, which lasts from T plus 53 minutes 44 seconds and runs all the way down through the deployment of methane sat at T plus 2 hours 33 minutes and 1 second. Before we go ahead and right now we are in the process of preparing to pivot to our coverage of the Starlink 6-41 mission. Although, don't fret, we are not going to fully abandon the Transporter-10 flight and its payload deployment. What we're going to do in between those, since we're in a long coast phase for about the next 40 minutes or so, is we're going to pause and pivot, and we hope you'll join us on the Starlink 6-41 mission stream. And there we will also be showing the payload deployments as they come up, as we continue to count down to the launch of the third SpaceX Falcon 9 mission within a 24-hour time period. Before we go ahead and wrap this up, though, I want to go ahead and thank some more folks for their support before we bring up our mission stats as they currently stand before SpaceX adds another one to its roster. Thanks to Smooth Juice for a £2 super chat. They're saying, no way is this. Thanks also to Pedro for €250 super chat. And to Callistia Lee, one of our wonderful channel members, for a very generous $20 super chat. Thanks so much, Callistia, who says, this never gets old. Thanks, Spaceflight Now, for the awesome coverage as always. Peeling away from the telemetry data for just a moment here to go ahead and run down the mission stats as they currently stand. This was the 5th flight of Falcon 9 booster 1081. The 306th Falcon 9 launch to date. This is SpaceX's 21st Falcon 9 launch of 2024. The 250th Falcon booster reflight, or the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. This is SpaceX's 21st orbital launch of 2024. It's 202nd within the last 365 days. This was the 68th orbital launch from Pad 4 East at Vandenberg, and the 136th overall orbital launch from that pad. Taking a look at the bar chart as it currently stands, 21 missions on the year as SpaceX continues to notch closer to its goal of about 144 to 150. Moving on to the recovery stats, this was the 16th landing at Landing Zone 4, which we saw, the 16th land landing in California. This was SpaceX's 64th overall land landing and the 280th overall booster landing for SpaceX to date. Finally, moving out to a global picture of the space industry, this was the 8th orbital launch from California this year, the 22nd orbital launch from U.S. soil, the 24th orbital launch from a U.S. rocket company, and the 43rd orbital launch globally. And taking a look at the pie chart of what this looks like, U.S. continues to lead with 24 launches on the year, 56% of the pie chart. China in second with 10, Russia in third with 3, and each India, Japan, and Iran with 2 launches apiece. And want to lastly thank Edward Deo Jr. for a $2 super chat. Appreciate the support as we close this out, Edward. And again, to see the deployment of all of the payloads that you saw launch on the Transporter-10 mission, be sure to join us over on the Starlink 6-41 mission live stream, which we are getting ready to start here in just about 30 minutes. So we hope you join us for that. We hope the fog burns off and we'll actually be able to see the rocket. We'll just have to wait and see what Mother Nature decides to do with that, but you can bet we will bring you the best vantage point that we possibly can with the launch team out here. I want to thank Stephen Young for running the technical operations of this broadcast, or Adam Bernstein, who set up these tracking views. See the telemetry now of the second stage as it continues to coast away from the west coast of the U.S. Again, our Starlink 6-41 live stream is going to go live at 5:55 p.m. Eastern. (22:05 UTC) for all of our friends joining us from around the world. We certainly hope you join us back in 30 minutes. So Now's a good time to grab a sip of water, maybe run to the restroom, grab a snack, go on and settle back in with us in about 30 minutes, and we'll see you for that live launch coverage. Until then, for all of us here at Spaceflight Now, be good to yourselves, be good to others. We will see you very, very soon. Till then, bye-bye.